I think there's a movement to say every single case involving a juvenile should automatically start in juvenile court. We're going to fight that like nothing you can imagine, because we recognize how terrible that will be for the community.
So that right there is Baltimore State's Attorney Ivan Bates pledging to the public that he is going to fight back against the state of Maryland, against the Maryland Black Caucus, who is trying to make it basically impossible to prosecute juvenile crimes. And I will just remind you that Ivan Bates is 100% proof positive that against the right person, somebody who's not obviously an ideologue, political pressure 100% works, because as we first talked about Ivan Bates when we were covering the Adnan Syed videos, he was actually running against Marilyn Mosby the first time as somebody who is woker than Marilyn Mosby, the previous Baltimore State's attorney, this absolutely corrupt individual who was caught defrauding the U.S. taxpayer and ended up facing criminal charges for that fraud, by the way, was convicted of that. But yeah, now all of a sudden, when he came back around in order to run against her in the primaries, he's ran on a tough on crime prosecutorial policy. And guess what? The proof in the pudding is in the taste. And under all the years of Marilyn Mosby, which by the way follows the Freddie Gray effect, you ended up seeing homicide spike dramatically. But as soon as Bates came in and actually was prosecuting people for crimes, not trying to get people out of prison, you saw homicides in Baltimore drop to their normal levels, which by the way are extraordinarily high. But look at how much worse it was when he was not in office and Mosby was in office. Now, with all that being said, Ivan Bates and 23 other prosecutors in the state of Maryland are sounding the alarm as the Maryland Black Caucus is seeking to undo all that progress by letting juvenile offenders off at a statewide level with a slap on the wrist and basically preventing these prosecutors from being able to do their job. And that's what we're going to talk about today. But before we do, I will remind you that my friend Devin Tracy, his parents lost their family home during the California wildfires. So he has started a GoFundMe in order to help his parents get back on their feet. So if you are capable of contributing, if you're a fan of Devin, please do. If you are incapable of doing so or just don't want to, don't worry about it. No pressure. I'm just trying to help a friend of mine.
Well, the Legislative Black Caucus of Maryland is listing out their priorities for this session. One of them is a law that changes how many juvenile cases are prosecuted. The bill would mean some of the most violent juvenile crimes would automatically start in juvenile court instead of adult court. City State's Attorney Ivan Bates spoke out against that plan earlier this year.
So real quick, I just want to point out for everyone out there in the audience is that there are certain crimes in the state of Maryland, certain serious violent felonies, that when they are committed by somebody who, let's say, is over the age of 16, are automatically prosecutable by the state's attorney as an adult charge. And this makes a lot of sense because 16-year-olds are capable of understanding at a higher level than 10-year-olds.
Now, the head of the State's Attorneys Association in Maryland says the state's other top 23 prosecutors agree. We take a closer look at the debate over this controversial bill.
But essentially the argument that is being made by the Maryland Black Caucus is that no, actually a 17-year-old and a 1-month-old baby, there's basically no difference between the two, and there's no possible way you could treat the overwhelming majority of these crimes as, of course, serious violent felonies that should be charged as adults, and this is essentially a way to let the kids get off. And by the way, I just want to point out that already there are struggles in places like the state of Maryland, in specifically areas like Baltimore, with youth offenders that they cannot hold accountable for repeated carjacking. And Ivan Bates has brought up these problems before, talking about how somebody steals a car, they end up crashing it, the police arrest them, they have to take them back to their parents, they leave their parents' home that same day, steal another car, and rinse and repeat, and there's nothing that the prosecution's office can do.
Well, Kai, as you know, over the past week or so, Baltimore City has seen over a dozen juveniles arrested for various crimes, including assault and armed carjackings. One of the youngest suspects, 12 years old, and tonight, talk of holding parents accountable. In Baltimore, an issue top of mind once again, holding parents accountable in some cases when their children commit the crime. The concern stirred up this week after police say a 13-year-old squeegee kid assaulted a 51-year-old man in his vehicle in West Baltimore Tuesday morning.
Also, in addition to that, don't think I didn't pull up this particular post from the Maryland Black Caucus, because not only do they want to do this for juvenile crimes, they also have a bunch of other crazy proposals that I just want to highlight for you because I think they're getting a little bit overlooked. So what we're really looking at is the public safety and justice reform. So obviously we have the Second Look Act, which allows people, again, to have their sentences re-examined. You have medical and geriatric parole reform, which would allow seriously ill people and elderly to get parole easier. We have the Youth Equity and Safety Act, also known as the YES Act, which is what we're examining specifically in this video, which is going to let a bunch of juvenile offenders off the hook. But then we have this right here. Repeal felony murder. Now you guys might think I'm joking about that, but I assure you this is on the official Facebook page of the Maryland Black Caucus. And yes, they're saying they want to repeal felony murder. That is in their top list of priorities in terms of what they want to do in 2025. And that means if you voluntarily participate in a felony, again, the classic example is a bank robbery, somebody shoots the teller during the course of the bank robbery, you are able to escape the felony murder charges that you would ultimately end up getting for your participation in that. And why? Because the Maryland Black Caucus is like, hey, felony murder, isn't that just evil white racism? Which is ridiculous and absurd from a number of levels, because obviously they're saying that black people tend to commit these crimes in larger groups and they don't like the outcome of these particular charges. In addition to that, what do you think happens when a group of people end up jumping somebody, stomping them out, and it's difficult for you to determine who actually delivered the killing blow? Well, under normal circumstances, that doesn't really matter because they all participated in the felony assault, so they can be charged with felony murder because they beat a person to death. However, under the repeal of felony murder laws, you have to figure out who specifically committed the killing blow. And if you can't do that, guess what? You can't charge them with murder. So it's an assault, a gang assault that led to a death that is no longer at the level of murder or manslaughter, which is absurd. Now, obviously, by the way, the people who are likely to get murdered and the people that you're going to seek justice for are disproportionately black victims. So, of course, this doesn't help the law-abiding black person. This doesn't help the black person that is victimized. This is all aimed at helping the black criminal. That is why the Maryland Black Caucus is pushing it forward. And the crazy thing about this is that this portion right here, this repeal of felony murder, isn't even what we're going to talk about today as the main topic. We're going to talk about them letting juvenile offenders off on a bunch of different charges, but I just want you to understand what level we're operating at with the Maryland Black Caucus.
It's called the Youth Equity and Safety Act, or YES Act.
This is a public safety bill.
Senator Will Smith, chair of the Judicial Proceedings Committee, says he'll back the legislation this year.
You're going to get better public safety outcomes when you get the services and the support that they need so that they don't recidivate.
If the bill passes, 75% of crimes that now start in adult court would start in juvenile court instead.
So here you have Senator Will Smith saying that you're going to get better public safety outcomes by passing this because you're going to get youth the services that they need. And again, I will point out that we've talked about on this channel specifically in Baltimore under Ivan Bates' jurisdiction, how this is definitely 100% not the case. What ends up happening for all the crimes that are already classified this way is you end up in situations where kids repeat offend time and time again. A lot of times this is carjackings. You get worse outcomes. They never go to the counseling or the midnight basketball or whatever these stupid programs are. And guess what? They do recidivate. They commit the crime over and over and over again. The exact opposite happens when you pass a law like this, and this idiot wants to expand that law to a whole host of additional crimes.
We are against it. The 24 state's attorneys are not in favor of automatic filing in juvenile court for a number of reasons.
The president of the Maryland States Attorneys Association calls it a threat to public safety.
Now look, although obviously the Maryland Black Caucus is behind this, they are much more progressive in the state government. The fact of the matter is, when you look at these prosecutors that are against it, even people who had previously ran as progressives like Ivan Bates, they're black as well. These are the people that are on the ground. These are actually legitimate prosecutors, actual legitimate people in these offices. offices who understand the consequences of the state government acting in that way. So I do want to give credit where credit is due. And again, a lot of people on the ground as well, the people who are not criminals, the law-abiding black person, also against this. The idea that black people want to be murdered by children and then have those cases thrown into juvenile court so that they could get a slap on the wrist is an absurd proposal, but it is what the left wing is pushing over and over again in this country, and in this particular case, in the state of Maryland.
One of his big concerns is slowing down the judicial process. He points to a law saying in juvenile cases, a Department of Juvenile Services officer has 25 days to decide whether to make an arrest in any given case.
So if a person shot up a school and the police had to go to a DJS intake officer, an officer can take up to 25 days to decide whether or not to make an arrest. It's very cumbersome, very slow.
So look, a lot of people are going to question this particular example because supposedly the most violent crimes are going to be chargeable as adult crimes. But the fact of the matter is, you guys are thinking of a school shooting or a shooting that has a bunch of different casualties. But what often happens in these gangbanger shootings is that they miss a whole bunch. Sometimes they hit people, just wound them. And this is what this guy is actually referring to, because that would be considered assault with a deadly weapon, and that could be punted down to juvenile court first and then be subject to the 28-day rule, where you can sit on the case for 28 days while this violent offender who was firing shots near a school or at school children or at a school is on the streets to reoffend again. This is exactly the kind of crime that, again, can be classified in this way. It doesn't have to escalate to murder for it to be a problem. Attempted murder should be considered just as serious as murder, but the law opens the door for this. And by the way, if they get their repeal of felony murder, if two people participate in this, one is the driver in the drive-by shooting, guess what? The driver is able to escape consequences because, gosh darn it, we can't have felony murder anymore. That's evil, white, and racist.
Another concern is DJS's ability to handle more cases. If this bill passes, the department would be flooded with new cases that Rich Gibson says he's not sure they'd be able to handle.
DJS's cup overfloweth right now, and they can't really handle it. They're not showing society that they are handling the kids they currently have, the portion of the kids they currently have, exceptionally well. The conversation would be very different if DJS was really handling the kids they currently have exceptionally well.
So look, this is also true, and by the way, also piggybacks on a story that we covered on this channel before, because remember, we talked about how the Department of Juvenile Services is so overwhelmed with criminal children, again, mostly from the city of Baltimore, that they were actually not jailing these children, but hoteling them in other neighboring communities, in suburbs and neighboring communities, and this ended up resulting in one child, or one teenager to be more accurate, who was convicted on sexual offenses, being housed in a hotel and then assaulting, I think, somebody who worked at the hotel or the social worker that was supposed to provide services to him.
And we have an update to a story we first brought you last night. State officials are keeping quiet after a teen is accused of sexually assaulting his assigned caregiver at a local hotel.
And by the way, the entire community had no idea that this type of an offender was being housed in their community. So this is what we see currently with the current caseload right now. And in addition to that, now the state of Maryland, at least the Maryland Black Caucus, wants to add to their caseload and says, don't worry about it. It's going to be great for public safety because we're going to send them to diversion programs. The diversion programs, like where we divert them to a hotel and then they attack people in the hotel, including their social worker.
Rich Gibson says there are already avenues for young people who are better suited for juvenile court to be transferred there, even in the most serious cases. He says state's attorneys would prefer to keep things operating the way they are now.
So again, this is also something that is 100% true. If you are a prosecutor and you have the option from the jump in order to prosecute this particular offender as an adult, you're not subject to that crazy 28-day rule or anything of the sort, and you decided that as a part of a plea bargain or as a part of something else, you want to punt it down to juvenile court, you can already do that. You can already move those cases based on your judgment, and as a prosecutor, you are elected to exercise that prosecutorial discretion to the juvenile system. But this law completely reverses that, puts an extraordinary burden on the prosecutor to escalate some of these cases to adult court. And again, just downright prohibits that escalation in a great number of cases. And it is all rooted in this idea that this is evil white racism. And of course, that 17-year-olds, they're basically little bebes, innocent bebe angel Aladdins, if you will. And we can't tell the difference between between somebody who is 1 day away from their 18th birthday and a 1 day old baby. Can you guys tell the difference? Apparently, the Maryland Black Caucus absolutely can't. And again, they want to legalize felony murder. What the hell is even going on? Now, that's all I really have for you guys today. I want to know what you guys think about this down in the comments below. But if you like this video, please show me by leaving a like, subscribe for more content, follow me on my social media, support me via the support links in the description of this video. This has been me talking about the Maryland Black Caucus going absolutely crazy. Till next time.